Now you see, because we started late and we've got a problem.
Okay, then we don't need to stream it on.
The virtual camera's working, but it's not picking it up. Anyway, it's in Zoom, so
Yeah, okay.
excuse us for the interruption. It was not set up properly. So, okay, Nilambar Chakravarti. Nilambar Chakravarti is doing a reading, and the more he got into the different, whatever he saw when he was doing his reading, the more he understood that this child, this is not an ordinary child at all. This is very, very special, even unique child. And he said that there was a prediction. There's a prediction that sorry. It's just, it got started late, so some interference. Yes, so there was a prediction that a king, someday a king will be born in Bengal as a Brahmin's son. And it seems to me that this child may be that king, a very, very special person. Nilambar Chakravarti found all sorts of very esoteric, very extraordinary, and very wonderful signs in all the different houses of the astrological chart of Gaura Chandra. He became astounded. He saw not just kingly signs, but he saw divine signs in the Lord's chart. So then, in the presence of everyone, Nilambar Chakravarti began explaining all the sort of ramifications and indications that were there in the Lord's chart. And the deeper he went into the chart, the more he found, the more difficulty he was having expressing it all. So Chaitanya Bhagavat says that Nilambar Chakravarti said that actually the qualities of this child displayed in his horoscope are beyond those of a king. They're way beyond those of a king. Actually, they are beyond description. They're beyond description. And so then he started making different predictions. What this child, Lord Gaurachandra, what this child will do, and what he will be like. So he said, this child will conquer the learning of Brihaspati, the guru, the priest of the demigods. He'll be the greatest scholar. He'll be a natural repository, reservoir of all divine qualities. And as he was describing like that, according to Chaitanya Bhagavat, one great saintly person who was present there in disguise was. Nobody knew who he was, but he was disguised as a Brahmin, some sort of mendicant like that. Then that Brahmin stood up and started making pronouncements about who is this child and what is his future going to be. Very amazing. So that Brahmin said, actually, this child is not just a king. This child is the Supreme Lord Narayan himself in person. This child is going to reestablish all the principles of religion. Because at that time, as I'm sure you're aware, in Navadvip particularly, even though Navadvip was a great religious center and a great center of learning, but it had become very degraded, particularly so many of the people there were worshipping Durga in degraded ways. Now, you all know there in Ujjain, you're all from Hindu backgrounds, so you know what the worship of Durga is like when, particularly in Bengal, and when they really get into it. It's there's a Durga Chandi. There's a lot of liquor, there's a lot of meat, and they offer animals to Kali Ma, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So in that sense, religious principles had become degraded, even in that very famous religious center of Navadvip. So this Brahmin saint, this saint disguised as a Brahmin, told everyone he will reestablish the real principles of religion. He will initiate a wonderful preaching movement and deliver the whole world. He'll bestow upon everyone that gift which is eternally desired by Lord Brahma, by Lord Shiva, and by Shukadev Goswami. This child, upon seeing him, just by seeing him, people will feel compassion for all living entities. And they'll become just indifferent, callous to all ideas of material enjoyment and the so-called pleasures of material life, and the pains of material life. They'll just become totally unaffected by these things. And when this happens, that saintly person said, when this happens, this will be the greatest benediction for the whole world. And, just to diverge a little, that's what this movement is doing. That's what this movement has done. When Srila Prabhupada first came, then I first saw Prabhupada in 1972, but he'd already been preaching in America and then later in Europe. And he'd been preaching, Prabhupada had been preaching to initially the young Americans. And all of them were living in really quite opulent situations compared to just your average person. They were not just sort of middle class or working class, but they were all, you could say, like business class people. And you've even got people like Ambarish Prabhu. I'm sure you all know Ambarish Prabhu, who's in charge of the building of the TOVP, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium in Sri Mayapur Dham. Ambarish Prabhu is from an extremely wealthy family. The family at least, they're a billionaire family for sure. But he was brought up in that sort of environment. But by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, he had contact with Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya's movement. And even though from such a wealthy background, he just felt, and he feels to this day, who cares about all that wealth? Who cares about that? Who's interested? And therefore he's donated millions and tens of millions of dollars to the construction of the TOVP. So like that sadhu said that the influence of this child, when he grows up and he becomes a preacher, his influence will be such that the people will become callous to the joys and the pains of material existence. In other words, they'll become transcendentally situated. And this will be the greatest benediction for the whole world. This will be the greatest benediction. Because otherwise, you see, as soon as a poor person gets money, then they think life has become a festival. Life is good. Anyway, so then the man, that saintly person, continued that what to speak of ordinary people, even hardcore atheists will worship the lotus feet of this child. He'll be glorified throughout the entire creation, and people from all the varnas, people from all the ashrams will come to worship this child as he grows up and really becomes deeply involved in preaching. He is the personification of pure Bhagavat religion, Sanatan Dharma. A lot of people from Hindu backgrounds, when they hear about Sanatan Dharma, they think that it's demigod worship and worship of different deities, including Lord Vishnu and Lord Krishna to some degree, but more like a general form of demigod worship, as is found in Hinduism. But of course, and this devotee here, he knows and he says that he is the personification of the eternal occupation of all souls in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. He will be the benefactor of the Brahmins, the cows, and the devotees, and the affectionate and devoted son of his parents. Of course, that was very true, very true. So he carried on. This child has come to accomplish great things. Just like the Supreme Lord Narayan incarnating to reestablish religious principles. So then he said, who can explain the import of this child's amazing astrological and esoteric symptoms. So how fortunate are you, Jagannath Mishra? You're so incredibly fortunate. I offer my obeisances unto you, the illustrious father of this amazing child. And so then that person said that I have actually done a calculation of his astrological chart. His name should be Vishvamba. And he can also be called Navadvip Chandra. He is spiritual bliss personified. So then, this devotee is talking about how wonderful Lord Gauranga is going to be. But of course, there's one thing he doesn't mention. You know what that is? Devotees, Ujjain say. You know what that is? He didn't mention anything about Lord Gauranga taking sannyas because he didn't want to create some anxiety in the minds of his parents or the other devotees who were there. So when Jagannath Mishra heard this, he was just completely overwhelmed, going from one level of astonishment to the next. And Jagannath Mishra, as part of his festival, because this is all now his festival on the next day, normally the name giving is done some days later, but this unusual special devotee, he's already given the name Vishvamba, he's mentioned Navadvip Chandra, but it is actually the next day after the appearance in the evening. So Jagannath Mishra immediately wanted to offer gifts to everybody who was there. That, of course, is the practice in such occasions, that the parents, they give gifts. Just like I can remember, for all you devotees there in Ujjain, as was stated earlier, I had really a lot of association with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And what a dear friend. Dear, what an amazing and wonderful relationship we had. And I remember one thing he told us in South Africa. It was someone's birthday, one of the devotees living in the temple. It was their birthday. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj told us all, and the devotee whose birthday it was there. Maharaj said, it's your birthday. You must give gifts. You must give everyone gifts. Don't sit there expecting everyone to come and give you gifts, as is the practice, of course, in Western so-called culture. I don't know what you'd really call it. It's not really culture, but whatever you'd call Western culture. So anyway, Jagannath Mishra, in ecstasy, just wanting to give and give and give in order to express his happiness, he fell at the lotus feet of that unknown Vaishnav mendicant who had just appeared out of nowhere. He fell at his lotus feet and cried and cried. And that Brahmin fell at the lotus feet of Jagannath Mishra and caught hold of Jagannath Mishra's feet. So they're both on the ground, holding each other's feet to their heads. And it's an amazing atmosphere. And everyone was just chanting, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, in ecstasy. So the relatives and friends were there, all coming and going and coming and going. It's just like, it's a kind of a whirlwind situation. So many people coming and going. And so all the relatives and friends, they glorified the beauty of Lord Gauranga and blessed him in terms of those supernatural predictions that they had heard. And then the festival continued. And now the musicians arrived. The musicians arrived. And they had their mridangas, their flutes, their shanais, and their different other instruments. And the whole atmosphere was filled with this joyous, beautiful music just resounding everywhere. And then, you know who came then? Now, the wives of the demigods, began to arrive. And of course, they disguised themselves as ordinary ladies, but still people could see that we don't know these ladies. We know everyone around here, but we don't know them. And they look so opulent and beautiful and just radiant with divine Shakti. Maybe everyone was thinking, maybe they're demigodesses, which they were. So then amongst them, Aditi, the mother of the demigods, she stepped forward in front of everyone. And she was holding in her right hand kusha grass, and raw rice, uncooked rice. And then she placed her hand on Nimai's head and then blessed him. You live a long time. You live a long time. And she said, please remain eternally in this material world and always manifest your pastimes. So like this, she was explaining the meaning of the idea of you live a long time, you stay here always. So Chaitanya Bhagavat says that Sachi Devi, Mother Sachi, the mother